thank you so much for coming to the mental illness seminar. Jennifer Bolajak will be our presenter. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or we're going to have questions later on.
Awesome. Well, happy Sabbath, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, today we are going to be taking a look into mental illnesses. And I'm going to be speaking specifically from my experience with mental illness struggles that I have had personally and that my late husband had. And so let me just dive right in. So it is called Inside Out. And then you'll be able to follow right along with us. So introducing myself, I am Jennifer Bolajak. I originally am from Indianapolis, Indiana, but I currently live in Orlando, Florida. And so Celebration Seventh-day Adventist Church is where I call home. I do have a bachelor's degree in elementary education, but music is my passion. And so I have the opportunity right now to have a music studio where I teach piano, flute, voice, guitar, violin, cello lessons from ages. I have a 3-year-old student all the way to full in adulthood. So just something that I love to do and something I love to share. It's also my ministry as well. I'm a worship leader at my church. And so I am a mother of 3. If you go to the next one, my oldest is Lena. She is 15. My middle is Lonnie. She is 8. And my youngest is Jake, and he is 3. So I have a full gambit of ages in one household, which is pretty terrifying. And so the person that I'm going to be speaking on other than myself is my late husband. And he's in the next slide. And so his name is Bradley Bolajak. He was the associate pastor for Celebration Seventh-day Adventist Church. And he suffered from anxiety and depression. And in 2018, November 2018, he took his life. And so 3 years later, we are still, picking up the pieces. And there was an article written on me in the Lake Union Herald, and we were just addressing the importance of talking about mental health and mental illnesses and removing that stigma that's attached to it. And so that is something that I have, it's obviously affected me very personally and deeply, and something that I want to make sure to share and get the message out there that it is okay to talk about it, that some of these feelings that you have might feel abnormal or thoughts that you have, but you're not alone, and many other people are suffering. And so it's time for us to do something about it. So you go to the next one. It says, mental illness is not contagious. You can't catch it by being kind. And I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it or are afraid to, interact with someone who, says that they have a mental illness, only because, they don't want to have it themselves, or, whatever the preconceived notion is. Sometimes I think that's what people are thinking. So in this seminar, it is very interactive. I am here to share my experience and my testimony with you to help you. And the only way that we can do that is if we establish some ground rules. And I do want to make sure that there'll be portions in the whole presentation where you'll be able to put your questions, your concerns, any comments. If you resonate with something that I say and you go, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel or how I felt, then just put that in there. And so this is a really great conversation for us to be able to have with one another in these very strange times where we have to do everything virtual. It would be much better to do it in person, but we won't let that stop us. So going into our ground rules, the first one is we want complete transparency and honesty. that is exactly what you're going to get from me, is complete transparency and honesty. I don't have anything to hide. You can ask me any question, and I will answer it to the best of my ability. Now, I do want to say that I don't have any certifications or formal education in counseling or mental health or mental illness. So this is all just my own personal journey and the things that I have learned and what has helped me. The next rule, we'll say, is no judgment. We want to make sure that we keep an open mind. And so any questions or comments or whatever is out there, don't be quick to make a judgment. We want to keep the lines of communication open. The next one is to use kind and supportive words and thoughts. So in this virtual world, it is very easy to type whatever and it's out there and you don't take responsibility for it. But we're going to be very intentional about using kind and supportive words and having kind and supportive thoughts. So anything that's negative, just go ahead and cast right out. Next rule is to be ready to ask for help or to provide help. So as we go through this, if you are noticing some things that you resonate with, or you can identify people in your life, you go, oh, they're checking off these boxes. It's time for us now to take a stand and a responsibility to help ourselves and a responsibility to help each other. And then the last one is we're going to open the prayer line. So what this means is we're going to get into some deep things and some things that might bring up hard emotions and hard thoughts. And that's part of this conversation. It is a hard thing to do, to be this transparent and this raw. So we want to open up the prayer line. We want to have God and the Holy Spirit come in and speak to us the way that we need to be spoken to, and however it is that we need to be helped, that he will bring us that help. So before we get started, if you will bow your heads in prayer with me. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for this opportunity that you have given us, for this conference that has been put together and the many hands that are helping to make it a success. Lord, you have plans for each and every person who is here in this particular seminar and who is logged in other seminars, Lord. I pray that you will be with us at this time, that as we go through some of these concepts, some of these experiences, that it might bring up some past hurt, some trauma, some pain. I pray that your Holy Spirit will be among us now, that you will give us peace, and that from it we can find help, that we can provide help, and that we can find healing, so that we can be a great testimony to you and your work. In your name I pray, amen. All right, so before I dive into everything, I wanted to just show what the most common types of mental disorders are. I'm not going to be talking on all of them, but this is just a list of the most common ones. So the first one you'll see, they are anxiety disorders, mood disorders, psychotic disorders, eating disorders, impulse control and addiction disorders, personality disorders, and then you have OCD, and then you have PTSD. So these are the most common types of mental disorders that are out there. You may see something that you recognize, or you may know somebody who is struggling with one of these here. OCD is something that's just kind of thrown around if somebody wants things very clean and neat and orderly. Sometimes we just say that they're OCD, but there really is an actual disorder that compels people to have to keep things in a certain way. So, and then we'll move to the next one. Now, these are the ones that I have personal experience with, and this is what I will be talking about today. The first one is anxiety. The next one is depression. And then following up from that is postpartum depression. So these are the three that have really been touched my life. For anxiety disorders, yes. People with anxiety disorders respond to certain objects or stimulations with fear and dread, as well as with physical signs of anxiety or panic, such as a rapid heartbeat and sweating. So if you've ever heard of a panic attack, I don't know if you've ever experienced a panic attack. I had recently, and I'll just tell you what my experience is. So with a panic attack, what's happening is your body is in fight or flight mode, and there is nothing in your environment to actually cause that. So you're not in actual immediate physical danger, but your brain thinks that you are. And so your heart, your whole body is just pumping you full of endorphins to try and figure out if you're going to fight or if you're going to run. And so you have this wave over you and you don't know what to do about it because, again, there's nobody attacking you. There's nothing outside to make your body feel this way. So that is kind of that rapid heartbeat, that sweating, that's what a panic attack feels like. That's what it felt like to me. Your chest is closing in. There was one point where I was crying uncontrollably. I could not get myself to stop crying. And I was like almost hyperventilating, breathing. And so that's my counselor to tell you how to get yourself out of that. What my counselor told me is because you have so much endorphins in your body, you need to expel energy. And so some different things that can help is to take deep breaths, like yoga breaths, if you've heard of that. So you breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And so you're forcing your body to calm down. If you're in a situation where you can go for a run, you can do that. Sometimes I'm doing push-ups, or if you can go to someplace quiet and you can just do jumping jacks. And so these are, sometimes your body just doesn't know what to do with all of this extra energy, and you need to just push it out. And overwhelming thoughts can kind of make that happen and come to light. And so that's just the way to get yourself out of a panic attack, is to breathe deeply or to do something that will expel that out of your body. So if we move on to the next one, for the anxiety disorder, it's diagnosed if a person's response is not appropriate for the situation. So if the person cannot control the response or the anxiety interferes with normal functioning. So to get one panic attack here or there, but if you are constantly getting panic attacks to where you can't function normal, this is where it starts to become more of a disorder than just a one-off. The next part of it is anxiety disorders include generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, and then specific phobias. So that fear of things will cause anxiety in you. Now, we all have phobias. We all have something that I'm sure that we're afraid of. I was afraid of spiders for the longest time. So I have arachnophobia. That doesn't mean I have an anxiety disorder, but it does mean that, if a certain stimuli comes across and my body reacts in a certain way, if it gets to where I can't function normally and that takes over my life, that's where I need to search for help. So I want to establish kind of the difference there between just having one thing and then a whole disorder. So if we'll go to the next one, you'll see kind of the stereotype, what people think anxiety feels like, where you worry about everything all the time. That big gigantic circle. What anxiety actually feels like is sweating a lot, second guessing yourself, muscle tension, trouble sleeping, chest pain, overthinking things, increased heart rate, your mind and body refusing to cooperate. No matter, it's your thoughts are irrational. All right. So if we go to the next slide, I did not suffer from anxiety myself. My late husband did. And so this is what it looked like to me as somebody from the outside looking in. It did look like worrying about everything all the time. So I didn't understand that he had so many other underlying things attributing to his anxiety. I just literally thought he was a worrier. He just worried. He overanalyzed every detail. He developed a nervous habit. So sometimes he would kind of scratch one spot in his head to where it would form a scab. So it was like detrimental to his health. He had a callus on his hand that he would scratch. And he would do that until, I mean, it was red. And so it's a nervous habit that becomes harmful to you and your body. The next, another way that I saw it is withdrawal into an escape. So he chose video games when we got married at 20. We were very young. So he would escape into video games, and he would play games in this alternate universe that he could control. And he would lose himself into that because his daily stress was too much for him to have to take on. And so he would find an escape mechanism. As we grew older and he matured more, he would withdraw into music, which sounds like it would definitely be more positive. And it can be more constructive to do that, but it was the same thing. It was a coping mechanism that helped him to escape from the world. He wrote lots of songs. He learned how to play the guitar very, very well. And so he would pick up lots of different instruments, yes, to be able to deal with his anxiety. And that's a more constructive way of being able to handle your anxiety. So that is what anxiety looked like to me. What does it look like to you? Do I have anyone here who has identified that they suffer from an anxiety disorder, or that you feel like you have anxious thoughts a lot? This is kind of your time to share. And then also share what works for you. So for my husband, it was video games, and then it was music. If you do suffer from anxiety, what is something that you do that works for you to help kind of take control over that?
You guys are welcome to unmute your mics and share. I'm getting from the chat, Victoria says, me too. And Jimena says, I like both. Victoria says, I love to play music and play video.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Games. Mm-hmm.
Same, Jimena says. I like music or talking to someone.
Oh, that's great. Definitely talking to someone, that's helpful.
I've also seen anxiety in overeating or undereating, and
yes,
too much exercise or just too much of something.
Yes. Yes. Oh, drawing and writing. Yes, absolutely. Writing. My counselor, I'm not a big fan of writing, but my counselor had suggested to keep a diary. Sometimes it's helpful to just get your thoughts on paper and just get it out of you so that it's not something that you're keeping into your head. Sleeping helps. Coloring. Yes, those adult coloring books. That's great. I used to do paint by numbers. Awesome. Awesome. These are really great. All right. Well, I don't want to cut anybody short. Okay, watching gaming streams. Mm-hmm. And these are ways that kind of help us to deal with the anxieties that we have on our own. Yes. Playing with friends, getting active. That's definitely a great way to, you want to kind of expel some of those energies out of your body. So being able to go out and do something physical is really helpful. Okay, great. Well, if nothing else, we can move forward to the next one. Perfect. Animals help as well. Yes. All right, so we're going into mood disorders. Go ahead to the next one. So these disorders are also called affective disorders. They involve persistent feelings of sadness or periods of feeling overly happy or fluctuations from extreme happiness to extreme sadness. Go ahead, next one. The most common mood disorders are depression, bipolar disorder, and then cyclothymic disorder, which is the fluctuating moods from mild depression to hypomania and back again. So that's like a cycle is where that word comes from. My late husband, I would identify, suffered from bipolar disorder. And so he would have periods of time where he was manic. His moods weren't quick. They didn't go from depression to very happy and then back again to depression. It wasn't a quick change. I've seen that in people before. His was more high. Something negative would happen and it was like, oh, okay, I can kind of handle that. Another thing negative would happen and then he would bottom out. And then we would be kind of down low for a while. And then it takes some time to kind of come back out of that. And then we would function. So we would function in this for a while. And that's why for me, I didn't recognize it as something to help him with. I just thought, I mean, everybody goes through rough times and we just have to ride the wave and come out of it. We need to pray a lot. We just need to pray more, which we do need to pray a lot. But sometimes, it's deeper than that. So we want to make sure that we want to acknowledge that as well. So we're going to just go into depression itself. Now, there are two types of main depressions that I'm going to talk about here. We have situational versus clinical depression. The more, I guess, the term that counselors and therapists are using now is major depressive disorder. So if you might have heard of clinical depression or MDD, major depressive disorder, that's what that's talking about. So here's a situational causes where you have problems at work or school, illness, the death of a loved one, moving, and relationship problems. Now, here are causes for clinical depression or major depressive disorder. There's no identifiable cause. Alcohol or drug use, certain medical conditions such as cancer or hypothyroidism, particular types of medications, or abuse during childhood. So that's why I wanted to present the difference, because I personally struggled from situational depression. My late husband suffered from major depressive disorder. And I can tell you right now, his stemmed from abuse during childhood. So my husband was heavily bullied as a child, heavily. From the time he was young, he was this little pipsqueak kid with glasses that were just too big for his face. And as he came into high school, middle school to high school, he just couldn't fit in. He couldn't find a niche. And his sisters, he has twin younger sisters that were very, very popular. And they made friends with, the popular kids and whatnot. And he just couldn't find a place and a circle to go into. And he would tell me of instances where he was just bullied, like what you see on TV, like pushed into lockers and, and dumped into a trash can. I mean, like things that you're like, oh, well, that's crazy. These things really happen to him, and it causes a lot of trauma. And it creates this kind of underlying, it tears down your self-esteem to where you're always constantly going back to it and thinking, I'm not good enough because other people didn't think that you were good enough. That becomes your thoughts, is that you're not good enough. It is rude. I know, it's terrible. But yes, so he had, hypothyroidism. Yes, and so these, if you identify with any of these causes here, if you feel like you suffer from depression or know someone who might, so these are some of the causes that you might see. So we're going to go into the symptoms. And this is how these come to light. Absolutely. So these are situational depression symptoms. This is what I had suffered from, and I suffered because of a loss of a loved one. So you experience sadness, you experience hopelessness, lack of enjoyment in normal activities, regular crying, constant worrying or feeling anxious or stressed out, sleeping difficulties, definitely, disinterest in food, trouble focusing, trouble carrying out daily activities, feeling overwhelmed, avoid social situations and interaction, and then thoughts or attempts at suicide. So for situational depression, well, this is what it looked like to me. Yes, go ahead. Because it looked almost exactly the same. I experienced sadness, hopelessness, lack of enjoyment in normal activities, regular crying. Yep, you could just cycle through it all. Everything that was on that list is what I felt, except not thoughts or attempts at suicide. My thoughts were more that people would be better off without me. So the difference for me is that I didn't want to take my life. I didn't have thoughts about taking my life. But what I did think was, if I weren't alive, people would be better off, because at this point, I'm just a burden. So after my husband died, it was constant sadness. I had my 3 kids to raise, and my 3-year-old at the time was 6 months old. So he was a baby. And my 2 oldest were, heavily involved in school. And so I'm trying to figure out how to get them to school and get everybody to where they need to be and fed and to sports. And I still had a baby that I was trying to nurture and trying to raise and feed and, everything, diapers, all of that. And so in the midst of all of this, I suffered from all of these symptoms came out, carrying out daily activities, trouble focusing, definitely feeling overwhelmed. When it says avoid social situations and interaction, I am a highly social person. I'm an extrovert, if you can't tell. And so I thrive on being with other people. So like this is really weird to me because I don't see faces, and I want to be able to interact. I want to see that you get me and I get you, and I just love having the face to face. And so for me to avoid a social situation was definitely red flags to my friends. So I didn't identify that I was depressed. My friends did, because they saw all this in me and they were like, we need to help you. Yes, yeah. So if we go to the next one, we're going to look at the causes for, yes. Did we do this already? Okay, sorry, yes. So clinical depression, there we go. Go ahead, yes, go to the clinical depression. Here's the criteria to meet for major depressive disorder. So mine was situational because of the loss of my husband. This is what clinical depression looks like, all right? And these are the criteria to meet. This is why I was different from my husband. You have experienced a change in your previous functioning. So you functioned on one level sometime, and then you experience a change. The next one is symptoms must occur for a period of 2 weeks or more. So it's a long term. And you have to have at least one symptom. One symptom is either a depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure. So at least one of your symptoms is either of that. So let's look at the symptoms for MDD. You feel sad or irritable most of the day, nearly every day. You're less interested in most activities that you once enjoyed. You have sudden loss or gain of weight or change in appetite. You have trouble falling asleep, or you want more sleep than usual. And so, and then you experience feelings of restlessness. So those are the symptoms. A couple more: unusually tired and have a lack of energy. You have feelings of worthlessness or guilt, often thinking about the things that that wouldn't normally make you think that way. Difficulty concentrating, thinking, or making decisions. And then thinking about harming themselves or committing suicide. So here's what it looked like to me. And this is what I saw in my husband. He was heavily bullied as a child into high school. He had a lot of anger. In high school, his release was heavy metal music. And so his sisters and his family would tell me that he would go up in his room and he had his headphones in, but it didn't matter because it was blasted so loud they could still hear it. But it was just loud, screaming angst music. And he did that. That wasn't just like a one-off. That was every day. That is what he had playing in his head to help him kind of deal with the bullying and all of the feelings that he had. He bullied his own siblings. And his little sisters would tell me stories, lots and lots of stories. He just was angry. He was an angry child, and he would take it out on them. And isolation, he would withdraw himself. And just, he wasn't highly social. He's more of an introvert, but he didn't shy away from social situations. But he would take periods of time where he would just isolate himself. He did experience sudden weight gain. And he had trouble sleeping, but he napped constantly. So at night, when it was time to sleep, he couldn't do it. And his mind was racing. And so he would get up, usually playing video games. But then throughout the day, he was constantly napping when he could, when he was working. He had lots of feelings of worthlessness. We would talk a lot about, I would have to affirm him and just tell him, you're doing your best, you're doing great, especially when it came to work. It's, you're a great dad, you're a great husband, you're a great friend. It was constant affirmation to help him, because he would be like, you're better off without me, or, I don't really contribute to the family. I'm not really helping you in any way. And so I'd have to help to build him back up. He had difficulty concentrating, thinking, and making decisions, especially making decisions. Going back to that anxiety, this is where the anxiety and the depression came into play for him, is he would overanalyze everything. And so when it came to, if it's, let's say, something simple, what are we going to have for dinner? Okay, so we can go, I don't know, we could go to Olive Garden, or we could go to get Mexican someplace. And then he would be like, okay, but if we went to Olive Garden, and okay, so it's already 7 o'clock, it's going to be late, and then it's going to take forever for us to sit down, and then the food's going to be cold, and then blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but if we went to Mexican, yeah, the food usually comes out faster, and that's really good. But sometimes, the servers aren't really nice, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, he would overanalyze everything, even for just a simple like decision between this or this. There was a lot of that happening. And so that was kind of colliding in his mind. Now, the last one is he was an excellent public speaker and pastor. And so when he did become associate pastor of our church, this was another way of him kind of stepping out of his persona. And this is why God is so good, because he will use you. Moses, he had a stutter and he used him. And so somebody like my husband, who suffered from anxiety and depression, and in his everyday life had a hard time functioning, when he stepped up on that pulpit, you would never know. And the message that he brought was always so powerful and always so relatable, because a lot of the time it was his own struggles. So it made for an amazing preacher and pastor. So if you go to the next one, a quote from Robin Williams, he says, "I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make people happy, because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless, and they don't want anyone else to feel like that." And this is what I identified in my late husband, was he would always want to clown around with his music. When he lost himself in music, he wanted to write music. He wanted to make people around him happy because he himself knew what it felt like to not be happy. And so it was almost like overcompensating for that. Does that make sense? So now it's your turn. I don't know if you have identified yourself in one of these, or if you have identified somebody in your life who suffers from or has suffered from situational depression or clinical depression. What does that look like to you? No one wants to talk. Everybody wants to be muted.
I mean, I would say the feeling of worthlessness was a big one for myself.
Okay.
And feeling like a burden was a huge one as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Not sleeping a lot and overanalyzing. That tends to be, that's really common, especially now. Any others? So before we move to the next one, I do want to find out, well, let me tell you what has worked for me in helping with depression. But you know what, actually, it's okay. We'll save that part for the end. So if there's no others on depression, then we'll move on to the next part. So this is postpartum depression. You guys might not, I'm not sure what ages we have here. I probably should have asked that at the very beginning. And because I don't see faces, I see a really pretty cat, but there's no way for me to guess how old you are or if you have any children. But I do want to address this because if you experience this sometime in your life personally, if you've not ever had children but you want to have kids, or if you have friends who do, this is something that I want you to kind of just be aware of. So this is postpartum depression. It does occur in more than 3 million women in the United States every year. It is after childbirth. It's different from baby blues. So I don't know if you've ever heard the term baby blues, you might. Baby blues occur 2 to 3 days after giving birth, and it only lasts for about 2 weeks. So that is, you've got a lot of hormones happening and a lot of adjustments in your body. And so it is natural to kind of feel sad and overwhelmed and depressed. But that usually lasts only for 2 weeks, and then you kind of go back to your normal self. So here are postpartum symptoms, and this is what to look out for. You have depressed mood swings or severe mood swings. You have your excessive crying, difficulty bonding with your baby, withdrawing from friends and family, loss of appetite or eating much more than usual, inability to sleep or sleeping too much. You have overwhelming fatigue or loss of energy. And you have a reduced interest in pleasure and activities that you used to enjoy. So this is, you see how these symptoms are very close to our situational depression, but this is just specific to after you've had a baby. Go ahead to the next one. You have intense irritability and anger. You have fear that you're not a good mother. Hopelessness, there it is again. Feelings of worthlessness, shame, guilt, or inadequacy, there it is again. Diminished ability to think clearly, concentrate, or make decisions. Restlessness. You have severe anxiety and panic attacks. Thoughts of harming yourself or your baby. And then reoccurring thoughts of death or suicide. So again, very similar overlapping, but this is specifically to when after you've had a baby. So here's what it looked like to me. Now I'll tell you, so I have 3 kids, as you know. My oldest, I had postpartum and I didn't know. I didn't know that I had postpartum until I was pregnant with my second baby. So if you see the ages, they're 6 years apart. So I had no idea, and I was young, I was 20. So nobody talked to me about this. I didn't know what postpartum was. I didn't know. And, we still didn't want to talk about mental health or mental illnesses then either. And so we didn't want to look weird, or, we didn't want anybody to look at us or treat us differently. So to me, it was mood swings. It was intense irritability and anger, definitely. Feelings that I'm not a good mother, regret. And then with the regret came the shame and the guilt for feeling regret. So it was this horrible cycle that I would go through. The next one is extreme sadness. And then I put unrealistic expectations for second baby. So when I had, my husband and I talked about having kids, I only ever wanted boys. It's all I ever wanted. I don't know why. I only ever wanted boys. And when my first baby was a girl, I took that really hard. And I don't know if you know this, but it's a 50-50 chance, you guys. Like, you can't control what you're going to have. It's either going to be a boy or it's going to be a girl. That's kind of the only options that we have. And so I took it really hard when I had a girl first. So then when I got pregnant with my second baby, my pregnancy was different. I carried her differently. I felt differently. My cravings were different. Everybody was like the midwife's tales, and they were like, oh, this is a boy. This one's a boy. And so I was totally hyped up for her to be a boy. And I went in for my first appointment to see what the sex of the baby was. And when the tech told me, congratulations, you're having a girl, I sobbed on the table, you guys. Like, my best friend came with me, thank goodness. And the tech was like, is she okay? Yeah. And she goes, she's fine. We're going to go see her doctor right after this, because we planned the appointments back to back. And I was devastated. And it was the unrealistic expectation for her to be a boy. And I took it so hard. And so when we went to my doctor, my best friend was talking to her, and she goes, so she suffered from postpartum from the first baby. And, we didn't really know about that. But now we want to be active about it. So should she take medication, a counselor, or what do you suggest? And thankfully, my doctor, my OB, said, I'm going to refer you to a therapist first. And so from there, she can decide whether you need additional help, whether you need medication of some sort. So I'm really thankful that she had the wisdom to do that and not just put me on pills right away. So if we go to the next slide, again, I don't know if any of you have kids of your own, if you've ever, if you have suffered from postpartum, or if you know somebody who has, this is your time now to kind of share with us. What does it look like to you? If you haven't, and you haven't really had any experiences with this, you could just be like, pass. Okay, so then you've got some time, Victoria. Okay, Jessica, you've got some time too. This is great though. I'm so glad you guys are hearing this with us. Yeah. Okay. All right, 13. This is just information. This is really great for you if you ever do decide to have kids. And as you get older and you see that your friends are having kids, you've already been equipped with some of the information to know what to look out to. Okay, 17. So you're closer than some of our other friends to thinking about children if you want children. Oh, Giselle's even closer. 19. Good for you with your dog. I don't have pets. I have children. That's what I tell everybody. Are you going to get a pet? And I'm like, no, I have 3 children. I don't need pets. We're fine. Awesome. Okay. So we'll move forward from postpartum. Yeah. Animals can be quite enough. Mental health is a sickness, just like diabetes, heart problems, eye problems. We all need health. This is something that I can't stress enough. It would be, I always compare it to cancer. When somebody says, oh, they're diagnosed with cancer, we go, okay, let's go get you to an oncologist. Let's get you chemotherapy. Let's go. We're going to pray for you. We're going to, we like to rally around people with who have cancer of some sort, and it's like let's support you in whatever. This is going to be a hard journey, but we got this. When somebody comes out and they say, I am feeling depressed, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I have had thoughts where I want to take my life, people get scared and they shut down. They say things like, oh, we don't talk about that. Oh, we don't, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Let's pray. Let's pray more. Let's pray. Let's just pray a lot and it'll be fine. Or, oh, you know what? Let's go to the mall. Let's go shopping. Let's go to the park. We'll just do something else. Let's get your mind off of this. So when you come to somebody, or somebody comes to you with something serious like that, then we need to treat it just like we would cancer and say, let's get you some help. Let's find somebody who can help you. All right. So that's this whole next part. This is like the most important part of the whole presentation. This next part says how to help yourself. All right. So here's the next slide. It all begins with you. If you don't care for yourself, you won't be strong enough to take care of anything in life. So you need to make sure that you are holding your own mental health at the top. You've got to be able to care for yourself. So if you find yourself as the oldest sibling, I know lots of pressures get put onto you. I was an oldest sibling, so I took care of my sister a lot. But you have to remember, you got to hold your own mental health up there. So here are some suggestions on how to help yourself. If you find that you're suffering from anxiety, oh gosh, okay, we're going to go through this quick. Here we go. Some things you can do: establish healthy sleeping habits, get more rest and relaxation, eat more healthily, especially vitamin D. You can strengthen your social support system, tell someone you trust, talk to your doctor. If you have already been prescribed medication that works, take your medication and see a therapist. Oh, the last one was to get exercise. That's huge. Get exercise. Go ahead to the next one. Just because no one else can heal or do your inner work for you doesn't mean you can or should or need to do it alone. So you are not alone. Look for help. Here's the last part right here. How to help someone else. Friends pick us up when we fall down. And if they can't pick us up, they lie down and listen for a while. The best thing that you can do for a friend is to listen. So you want to listen. Go ahead. Don't judge, argue, threaten, or yell. Stay with that person as long as you can. I know many of you guys are really young, but if you have a friend who's identified, who has said, I want to take my life, you need to tell their parents to remove anything harmful from that person. Guns, knives, medication, other things that can harm them. Encourage them or help them talk to an adult that they can trust, and encourage or help them find a therapist that they can talk to. So sometimes when we're young, we don't feel like we can do anything. We have no control, but you can either encourage them, and if you feel like it's really serious, you can go to an adult that you trust. If it's your parents, if it's their parents or somebody, and say, hey, this person is struggling and they need help. And then the next one here, we just have 2 more slides. And then yes, encourage them to go to the doctor. One awesome thing about Eeyore is that even though he's basically clinically depressed, he still gets invited to participate in adventures and shenanigans with all his friends. They never expect him to pretend to feel happy. They never leave him behind or ask him to change. they just show him love. So I don't know if you feel this, but sometimes you just need love. So if you have a friend who does have some of those symptoms that you don't know what to do with it, just keep inviting them to things, keep asking them to play, don't be different around them, just keep showing them love. And then suicide prevention. So this is more on the serious note. Call 911. This is like if it's really like dire, they're wanting to do something quick. So you want to call 911 if you think someone's considering suicide. There is a national suicide prevention lifeline. And this is, I have given this number out to countless people for them for their parents to call or for them to call themselves. And it's just somebody that they can talk to that will help them to talk through what they're feeling and help them process through their emotions. So if you have something to write on, I would definitely take that number down. That is a really important one for you to have if you ever need it, or for one to share if you ever find yourself in that position. Otherwise, that's it.
You guys, thank you so much for coming. The next seminar is starting in 1 minute.
Cool.
So for those of you who were in this seminar, you can choose your next one following the links that were sent to the email.
Oh. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye. It was nice to meet you all. Kind of. Oh, God bless you. Thank you. Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Happy Sabbath. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is your second seminar, and this one is on mental health. And so it is entitled Inside Out. So we are going to be going right into it, starting right away. I've got a lot of information to share. And so before we get started, though, I do want to introduce myself. I am Jennifer Bolajak. I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I currently live in Orlando, Florida. But the information that I'm going to share is my own personal journey and experience with mental health and mental illness. I am not certified or have any formal education in psychology or mental illness like that. And so everything that I speak to you, it's my testimony. It's from me and what I have learned and what has helped me. And so I just want to share that with you to give you some tools to help you or to recognize signs in others, just to really, really get stop the stigma of mental illness. So if we go to that next slide, I was featured the story for me in the Lake Union Herald about 3 years ago, November of 2018. My husband, who was the associate pastor of Celebration 70 Adventist Church, suffered from anxiety and depression, and he took his life. And so we were talking about the article is just bringing mental illness and mental health to light and stopping the stigma of not wanting to talk about it, keeping everything hush hush. I do have a bachelor's degree in elementary education, but my passion is music. And so currently right now I teach piano, flute, voice, guitar, violin to ages 3 all the way to adulthood. I have adult students as well. And so music is my passion. I am one of the worship leaders at my church in Celebration Seventh-day Adventist Church. I have 3 kids. My oldest is Lena. She's 15. My middle is Lonnie. And then you see my baby right there, Jake. He's 3. And so for the next slide, the the experience with mental illness that I have is my own personal experience, and then my late husband's experience. So as I said, that's Bradley Bolajak. He was the associate pastor there at Celebration Church, and he lost his battle with anxiety and depression. So if we go to the next one, I want to just put this out there. Mental illness is not contagious. You can't catch it by being kind. Sometimes we don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable to hear. We don't know what to do with the information that we're receiving. And so we want to push away. We want to shy away from it, when all we really need to do is show kindness. Like, if we could just be a little bit more kind, the world would be a better place, would it not? So as we continue on, we're going to establish some ground rules. Now, this seminar is designed to be interactive, and they're going to be, it is very weird, not weird, I guess everybody's used to it now, but I definitely want to hear your input, and I want to know struggles that you might be having or questions that you have. And so there will be parts broken up in throughout the presentation that will allow you to be able to share questions and whatnot. And you can either do that on the chat, or you can unmute and then you can speak to us directly. So here are some ground rules before we get started. I'm going to ask for complete transparency and honesty. I am going to be completely transparent and honest with you. And so as you are sharing, then I just ask the same from you as well. The next one is no judgment. No judgment. In this kind of environment where we're behind a screen, it is kind of easy to hide, but we want to open our minds and expand ourselves just a little bit. So you're in the seminar for a reason. So I would encourage you to release all the judgment that you might have. Going on that, we're going to use kind and supportive words. So in that chat, again, really easy to send out whatever because you're anonymous, especially if you're not showing your actual face on video or even your own picture. But we want to make sure that we're using kind, supportive words and thoughts. So even in our thinking, we want our thoughts to be kind and supportive. So we're going to be really intentional. Be ready to ask for or provide help. So there might be some things that we discuss that may bring up some past scarring and some past trauma for yourself. Maybe you didn't know, or you've been wrestling with it for a while. So be prepared to ask for help for yourself, or as we're going through this and you can identify somebody in your life who is suffering from one of the things that we're discussing, then get ready to provide help to them. So part of my mission is to really break down the walls of that negative stigma behind mental illness and mental health, and help everybody I want it to just be something commonplace. We talk about different diseases, we talk about all sorts of things that plague us, but for some reason, when we talk about mental health, it's much better now than it was years ago, but there's still a little bit of a stigma attached to it. And so then lastly, I do want to open the prayer line. So by opening the prayer line, what that means is that because some of this trauma or whatnot might be dredging up, we're just going to reach for the Holy Spirit to come down and really help us to be able to deal with some of those things and open our minds. And so we know exactly what to do with the information. So with that, let's bow our heads for prayer before we get started. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this beautiful Sabbath day and the opportunity that you've given us to be together, even though we are apart. I pray that you will be with me, excuse me, and the information to share. And I pray that you will be with those who are here in attendance, that they will be able to walk away with tools that will be able to help them, whether they are struggling themselves or whether they know somebody who's struggling. Lord, I pray that you will help us to band together and just be a support to one another. In your name I pray, amen. All right, so in continuing, I'm just going to show you just different common types of mental disorders. This is just kind of a whole list of common types of mental disorders. So you have the first one, or one type, is anxiety disorders. The next one, mood disorders, psychotic disorders. You have eating disorders. You have impulse control and addiction disorders, personality disorders. There's OCD, and there's PTSD. PTSD, you might have heard more linked to soldiers or anybody who's gone into battle. OCD sometimes comes with somebody who likes things very clean, neat, and orderly. So these are all different types of disorders that are out there. I don't know if you have identified yourself with one, but I'm going to share in my the ones that I've personally suffered with or have experience with. So we have anxiety, depression, and then specifically postpartum depression. So moving forward for anxiety disorders. So people with anxiety disorders respond to certain objects or situations with fear and dread, as well as with physical signs of anxiety or panic, such as a rapid heartbeat and sweating. So we can go to the next one. An anxiety disorder is diagnosed if a person's response is not appropriate for the situation, if the person cannot control the response, or if the anxiety interferes with normal functioning. And then anxiety disorders include generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, and specific phobias. So let me tell you how, when I think of the anxiety disorder, panic attacks. I don't know if any of you have ever had a panic attack or if you've heard of that before. I've had 2 panic attacks in my life, and I can tell you what it feels like. It is your whole body goes into this fight or flight mode, and so your heart is racing, you're sweating, you have this almost this, it felt like pressure on my chest. It's like if you've ever been swimming in the ocean and the waves are just coming at you and you can't get up for air for some reason, you're constantly fighting to come up for air and you can't because the waves just keep hitting you in the face. That's what it felt like to me. I was crying uncontrollably. I couldn't stop. I had to breathe. It was so intense. And when I had explained that, my counselor had explained what happens during a panic attack. It is there's nothing in your environment to cause this. There's no bear chasing you. There's nothing around you for your body to come into this mode. But for some reason, something in your brain says you got to do something. And so you have this fight or flight, you have all of these endorphins pumping into you. And because there's no external stimuli, you look like a crazy person because you don't know why you're feeling this. And so if that ever happens to you, or if somebody talks to you about that happening, what happens is, or what you need to do is expel energy. So you've got all this energy built up, you need to get rid of it. You can do deep breaths, like I was doing yoga breaths, where you breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes running, just getting the energy out if you're in a space that you can do that. Jumping jacks, if you go out, if you go someplace that's a little bit more contained, put yourself in a room and just do jumping jacks. But you've got to be able to expel that out of your body so that you can kind of regain control of yourself. So that's what happens when you have a panic attack. And any of these anxiety disorders, something triggers in your brain for your body to react like that. So when it says specific phobias, I have a phobia of spiders. I have arachnophobia. But when I see a spider, I do not have a panic attack. All right. So you can have a phobia and not have an anxiety disorder. So I kind of want to show that a little bit. So we can go to the next one. So what people with anxiety, what people think anxiety feels like. So that big circle, worrying about everything all the time. And this is me. This is what I thought that people with anxiety felt like. This is what anxiety actually feels like. Sweating a lot, second guessing yourself, muscle tension, trouble sleeping, chest pain, overthinking all the things, increased heart rate, your mind and body refusing to cooperate no matter what you know is rational. So again, that kind of feeling, you're like, I shouldn't be feeling this. There's nothing happening, but your mind and your body won't calm down. That is what anxiety actually feels like. So if you go to the next slide, my late husband suffered from anxiety. So I didn't personally, he did. And this is what it looked like to me. This is what he looked like. So it did look like worrying about everything all the time because I didn't know. I didn't suffer from it. He overanalyzed every detail. He had developed a nervous habit where he would like kind of scratch the top of his head, one spot in his head to where it actually became a scab, or he would scratch a callus that was on his palm and he would scratch it until it was just red. So it was a nervous habit that was physically like becoming a physical detriment to him. It also looked like a withdrawal into an escape. So we got married real young. We were 20 when we got married, and he would escape into video games. And he would that's where he would lose himself because he couldn't control the world that we lived in. And we did have our first child soon after we got married. And so we were young, being married, and we already had a baby. And so all of these responsibilities were kind of just shoved on top of him, and he was not ready. And so to cope, he would escape into video games. As we got older, he would lose himself into music, which is a little bit more of a constructive way to deal with his emotions. So he wrote tons of songs. He was a great guitar player. And so these are kind of the things that I had identified for anxiety. So now it is your turn. What does anxiety look like to you? So whether you identify someone else who suffers from anxiety, or if you have it yourself, I'd like to know what you've noticed or what you have done or do to help you cope with your anxiety.
You guys can unmute your mic.
For me, because I deal with not like clinical anxiety, but I do have a lot of anxiety. And for me, sometimes it's a lot of like rumination of thoughts like that prevent me from sometimes doing, things that I know that I shouldn't have an issue with. Like, for example, sometimes traveling, even though like I know everything's going to go fine and I have my whole trip planned out, sometimes I ruminate over, oh, I left my ticket and I'm going to lose my ticket and everyone's going to laugh at me and I'm going to have to go to the end of the line. Like I'll keep ruminating in those thoughts, even though I know everything's going to go fine and there's nothing wrong. But sometimes it sometimes prevents me from wanting to travel sometimes. So
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? All right.
I'm happy to chime in.
Okay.
And just talk about, I grew up wanting to be a perfectionist.
Mhm.
And, on that chart, OCD, I've learned as I've gotten older that you just have to let some things go.
Right.
Although the average things that people, it's easy for them to let go. Again, in my role, I oversee a lot of things. And so my trouble is taking up things that I really should have let go,
Yes.
type deal, only because I just can't at the end of the day. And, I still, again, this is honesty, if I see something, we have a custodian that takes care of the building, but if something's on the floor, I'm picking it up. If something's out of place, I'm putting it back in place. That's a bit of an OCD in me. If the grounds, if I see something, I want to get engaged And I guess through help with the great God that we serve, I'm learning to just let things go. You cannot manage everything at the
Absolutely.
end of the day. But again, these are things that we all just have to be willing to be honest and open
Mhm.
about in terms of what can we really be effective at and really stay focused on
Yeah,
that particular dynamic relative to what does God want me to
yeah,
achieve and accomplish
yeah,
relative to his plan for my life.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you for this sharing dynamic that you're doing with us.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. It only works if you share. So thank you. Awesome. So we'll just move right along to mood disorders. All right. So these disorders are also called affective disorders. They involve persistent feelings of sadness or periods of feelings overly happy or fluctuations from extreme happiness to extreme sadness. The most common ones coming up next here. So these are the most common mood disorders. You have depression, bipolar disorder, and then cyclothymic disorder. So that's fluctuating moods from mild depression to hypomania and then back again. And so my husband, so after he had passed and I spoke with my counselor, I think I forgot to share in the last one, but we had covered up his mental illness and his struggle until the very end. And this is why I make it such a passion of mine to want to get this out there, because we never searched for help for him to be able to be diagnosed with whatever it is that was plaguing him and to get the right help that he needed to be able to function where he needed to function. But in talking to my counselor and kind of describing his life and how he would get to a situation, he actually diagnosed him with bipolar disorder. So cyclothymic and bipolar are different because bipolar is more, you do have highs and you have lows, but they're not fast. They don't happen quickly. It's usually, like highs, and then you have a couple of things that might set you back, and then you have a little bit of a low for a while, and then you come back to that high, right? I thought that was just life. I thought, well, everybody has setbacks, everybody has things that you struggle with, and then yes, you can be sad, and it's okay to be sad, but we got to pick ourselves back up, and then we got to go, continue on. So again, I had no idea because I didn't struggle with it like he did. So if we move to the next one, I'm going to focus specifically on depression. So there are two different types of depressions: situational and clinical depression, or what our counselors and therapists now are calling it major depressive disorder. I personally suffered from situational depression. My late husband suffered from the major depressive disorder. So here are some causes. Situational depression: problems at work or school, illness, death of a loved one, moving, and relationship problems. So my depression was, the trigger was the death of a loved one. So for the major depressive disorder, there's no identifiable cause, not really. Some suggested ones are alcohol or drug use, certain medical conditions such as cancer or hypothyroidism, particular types of medications, and abuse during childhood. Now this was him. He was heavily abused as a child. And so this was his cause for suffering from that major depressive disorder, because he just had the worst experience. It was like, those movies of those nerds that you see, and they're like being pushed up against lockers or being like put into trash cans. And you're like, oh, that's not real. People don't do that. No, that really happened to him. He was just little small pipsqueak, and his glasses were bigger than his face, and he just didn't fit in, and he just couldn't find a niche. And so because of that, he was picked on, unfortunately, and it was never addressed. that bullying was never addressed. And so that's what caused us into our adulthood for him to manifest with so many different things. So if we go next, here are some symptoms. Now this is situational depression symptoms. Here's what you might see: sadness, hopelessness, lack of enjoyment in normal activities, regular crying, constant worrying or feeling anxious or stressed out, sleeping difficulties, disinterest in food, trouble focusing, trouble carrying out daily activities, feeling overwhelmed, avoid social situations and interaction, thoughts or attempts in suicide. So these are some symptoms you might see. Here's what it looked like to me. It basically looked exactly the same. If you just go through, it did look like sadness and hopelessness, lack of enjoyment in normal activities. It did look like regular crying. I couldn't stop crying. Constant worrying or feeling anxious or stressed out. Yes. Sleeping difficulties. Yes. Disinterest in food. Yes. It was all of it. If you just go through. Now, the one thing that my friends, I didn't identify myself with depression. I didn't think I had it. It was my friends who actually came to me and said, Jen, we need to help you. Because where it says avoid social situations and interaction, I don't know if you can tell this on Zoom, but I am highly extroverted. So I thrive on being with other people. I love social interactions and social get-togethers. So it's really hard for me because I don't see your faces. Some of your faces I can see, which is great. But some of you, have like, I think that's an owl. It's cute, but it's hard. I can't really emote with you. I don't see, your reaction to me, and it's difficult to be able to gauge feelings like that. But there were times where, my friends would want to get together and I would just be like, no, I don't want to. And being a now single mother of 3, it was always because I didn't want to have to bring all my kids and then be a burden to everybody, because it was me with my kids and all of my friends who didn't have kids at the time. And I'm trying to chase my little toddler around. It was a mess. And so I avoided social situations. Now, the other thing that's different too is I didn't have thoughts of suicide or attempts of suicide, but I did have thoughts that people would be better off without me, which is, it kind of goes along the same lines. I never thought I need to take my life, but I did think, you know what, I think people would be better off without me because I'm a little bit of a burden right now. So if we go to next, the situational versus the clinical depression causes. So just to look that through one more time, knowing that there's the situational causes. Mine again was death of a loved one. The major depressive, where his was abuse during childhood. If we go into now the clinical depression, this is the criteria to meet for the clinical depressive disorder. So the first one is experience a change in your previous functioning. The symptoms occur for a period of 2 weeks or more, and at least one symptom is either depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure. So you can have the whole list of things, but if one of those is depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure, then that might tilt you to the scales of major depressive disorder. So here are some symptoms. Feeling sad or irritable most days, nearly every day, less interested in activities that you once enjoyed, sudden loss or gain of weight or change in appetite, trouble falling asleep or wanting to sleep more than usual, experience feelings of restlessness. And then the next one is unusually tired, have lack of energy, feeling worthless or guilt, often thinking that thinking about things that wouldn't normally make you feel that way. Sorry. Difficulty concentrating, thinking, or making decisions. And then thinking about harming themselves or suicide. So for me, looking at him, this is what major depressive disorder looked like to me. He was heavily bullied as a child into high school. He manifested with anger. And so through high school, he would listen to heavy metal music. And his parents and sisters would tell me he'd have headphones on, but it was blasted so loud that they could still hear it. And it was just like that yelling, like, oh, kind of music. That's kind of scary, but he would blast it because that's what would help him to cope with some of his feelings. He would turn his bullying to his sisters. He had 2 younger twin sisters, and then he would bully them. And then he would isolate himself a lot. He didn't want to go around other people. He'd isolate himself. He did have sudden weight gain. So as we were married, there was a time in our marriage where he just gained a ton of weight very quickly. He had trouble sleeping at night, but he would be constantly napping. So if he wasn't at work, he would nap. As soon as he came home from work, he would nap. But at night, he couldn't sleep. And so then he would be up either playing video games or doing music or something. He was constantly up. So his cycle was all crazy. He had a lot of feelings of worthlessness, a lot. And this definitely stems from that bullying, where I would constantly have to reaffirm him and say, look, you're a good dad, you're a good husband, you help. And he was constantly like, I don't contribute. I'm terrible and blah, blah, blah. And I would have to tell him all the time, no, you can do this. You've got this. He would have difficulty concentrating, thinking, and making decisions. So let me tell you the extent of the making decisions part. It was like, this is where I know his anxiety and depression would meet. When we talk about making decisions, let's say we're going to go out to eat. And if we're going to, let's say it's Olive Garden or a Mexican restaurant, and 2 simple choices. You want Olive Garden, you want Italian, or you want Mexican? What do you want? And he would be like, okay, well, we could go to Olive Garden, but let's see. Okay, it's already 7 o'clock. They're going to close soon. And then the food isn't going to be prepared well. And then we're going to have a horrible service. And then the food is not going to be, this isn't going to be right. And it's not going to be fresh and whatnot. But if we go to the Mexican restaurant, then their food does come out faster, but we don't always have the best service when we go there. And it was a constant battle. And then you had talked about kind of over analyzing things and kind of thinking through things in your mind. That's exactly what he would do. Is he would take small things and just think it through, and it would drive me nuts. But again, that's not how I manifested it. And so I didn't know how to understand it. I didn't know what he was thinking in his mind or how to help him. And so that is what it looked like to me. The last part there is he was an excellent public speaker and pastor. And let me tell you how good our God is. This is how good our God is. Despite having so many struggles, to be bullied as a child, to suffer from anxiety and this depression every day, he had this amazing gift to speak. Amazing. And when he wrote his music, and when he became pastor, he was so nurturing. And it just goes to show, like, Moses had a stutter, and what God did with Moses, like, despite our shortcomings, God uses us in incredible ways. And that's what he did with my late husband. And he was just an incredible speaker. You would never know. You'd never know that he suffered the way that he did when he stepped up on that pulpit. It was like a whole new person. So if we go to the next slide, it says, I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make people happy because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless, and they don't want anyone else to feel like that. So now we're seeing that a lot of stars, a lot of comedians especially, are who are taking their lives, suffer from depression. And it's that sadness, they want to overcompensate almost. That's what he did as a pastor. As a pastor, he was extra nurturing because he knew what it felt like to just be absolutely worthless and to think, nobody cares about you and you're worthless and whatever. But he wanted to make sure nobody else felt like that. And so that kind of came out. So if we go now, What does that look like to you? So that was a lot between the two different kinds of depressions. What do you guys think about that? Have you seen it, identified it, maybe not in yourself, if you've identified it in somebody else? Or sometimes you can see, oh yeah, I've had tendencies of this or whatnot. I have 10 minutes, you guys. If not, that's okay. Oh, yep.
Just to get the ball rolling, right? Yeah, there are certain signs that I see from a close friend, and the more you talk about it, the more like evidence they became.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as I was putting some of this together, even before, as I was doing research after my husband passed, all of friends that I had come, in interaction with, I'm like, oh my goodness, the signs were there. They were right there. I just didn't know what to do with them. And so now that's why it's just so much of a burden on my heart to share it, because knowledge is power. So once we know it and see it, then we know what we can do with it, So if there's no others, that's okay. We'll move on, because the most important part is where I get to how it can help. I'm going to put this up to you. My last group were young. You guys are older. But this part is postpartum depression. And this is what I suffered with personally. So I don't know if any of you guys out there, I see two people sitting next to each other, and I'm not going to assume that you guys are couples, because that's a terrible thing to always assume. So I'm not going to assume any couples out there. But if you are thinking of having kids, or you do have kids, or whatnot, this part can kind of speak to you. If you are a child, then this part probably won't speak to you. So I can go by it very quickly, or we can go right into the help part. What do you think? This is the interactive part. Give me like a thumbs up if we want to do this.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I love it. Yes. Okay. So here we go. It does occur in more than 3 million women in the United States every year. The key thing here, it is after childbirth. And it is different from baby blues. So it occurs 2 to 3 days after giving birth. This is baby blues and lasts up to 2 weeks. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term baby blues before, but it is very natural for all the hormones in your body for you to get very sad and kind of move slowly and be out of your personality for about 2 weeks after you have the baby. But after that period of time is where you should be seeing yourself coming out of it and back to your normal self. If you don't see yourself coming out of it back to your normal self, then you might want to consider talking to your doctor about postpartum depression. So very quickly, here are some symptoms. We can just throw them all up there. Depressed mood swings, excessive crying, difficulty bonding with your baby, withdrawing from friends and family, loss of eating or appetite, inability to sleep or sleeping too much, overwhelming fatigue or loss of energy, reduced interest and pleasure in activities that you used to enjoy. So you're seeing the same overlap of depression symptoms and postpartum symptoms, but this is specifically after you've given birth. So that's the difference here. Next one, here's more intense irritability and anger, feelings you're not a good mother, hopelessness, worthlessness, diminished ability to think clearly, restlessness, severe anxiety and panic attacks. We talked about that. Thoughts of harming yourself or your baby. So if you, this is great. These symptoms are great to know, because if you see somebody who is exhibiting some of these symptoms, you can help them to identify, you know what, I think we need to talk about postpartum depression. I say that because, as you saw, I have 3 kids, 15, 8, and 3. I suffered from postpartum depression after my first child, and I didn't know until I was pregnant with my second child. So that's 6 years apart that I had suffered from postpartum depression, and I didn't know about it. So let's see what that looked like for me. It looked like mood swings, intense irritability and anger, feelings that I wasn't a good mother, regret, which then turned into shame and guilt, because I had regret, and then that just was a horrible cycle. Extreme sadness, definitely. The last one is unrealistic expectations for second baby. And I put that because I only ever wanted boys. It's really weird. I don't know. I only wanted boys. And when my first baby was a girl, I took that really hard. And I don't know if you guys know this, but it's a 50-50 chance of what you're going to get. So you're either going to have a boy or you're going to have a girl. You can't really plan those things out. So to put on the expectation that I'm going to have a boy is unrealistic. That's what happened when I went in for the ultrasound for my second baby. I had a different pregnancy. I carried her different cravings, everything. And then said, when the tech said, congratulations, you're having another baby girl, I sobbed. You guys, I lost it on the table. And so my best friend was like, we're gonna go talk to your doctor and see if we can get you some help. So thankfully I had her in my life to recognize these symptoms in me to help me get some help. And I did, I had therapy before I had my second baby. So I didn't have to have postpartum again with my second child. So we'll move forward from that. We can skip over that and go to, this is huge. This is huge. Mental health is a sickness, just like diabetes, heart problems, eye problems. We all need help. We all do. So it's just like when somebody's diagnosed with cancer and we rally around them, right? We're like, let's get you an oncologist. Let's get you chemotherapy. We're going to be with you every step of the way. We're going to support you. You know, this is going to be hard, but we can do it. But when somebody comes up to you and says, look, I am having thoughts of wanting to take my life, then we go, no, we don't have those thoughts. No, you're fine. You're fine. You're just sad right now. Let's go shopping. Let's go to the park. Let's get our minds off of it. Instead of saying, okay, I hear you. Let's get you some help. Let's find out what's going on in your life to get you out of this. Let me support you through this. Right. So that's kind of the difference as how we come at the different illnesses. If you find that you are suffering from any of the things that we talked about, these are things that I use to help myself. So here's how you can help yourself. Go ahead. It all begins with you. If you do not care for yourself, you will not be strong enough to take care of anything in life. So if you are a mom, if you are the oldest sibling or whatever, sometimes you have a lot of responsibilities that's put on top of you. You have to take care of you first. And I learned about that too. Otherwise, you're not going to be strong enough to take care of anything else. So here are some suggestions. Here are some things that you can do to help yourself. Establish healthy sleeping habits. That's huge. Get more rest and relaxation. It's not just sleeping to sleep, it's relaxing. Eat more healthily. Vitamin D, that's a real thing. There's vitamin D deficiency out there. Sometimes you take a vitamin D supplement and it can turn your whole chemistry makeup the right way. Strengthen your social support system. Tell someone you trust. Talk to your doctor. If you have already been diagnosed with something, take your medicine like you're supposed to. If it's not working, tell your doctor, this isn't working, see a therapist. That's huge for me, is to see a therapist. Oh, that's my son. Next. This one says, just because no one else can heal or do your inner work for you doesn't mean you can, should, or need to do it alone. So remember, you're not in this alone. Now here's how you can help someone else. And this I think is really important. It says, friends pick us up when we fall down. And if they can't pick us up, then they lie down and listen for a while. As a support person, just listen. Don't judge when somebody is telling you, these are the things that I'm feeling, I'm feeling anxious, don't try and give them a solution to their anxiety. Just listen to them and I understand. I hear you. That must be hard. That's difficult. But we try to fix things sometimes because we think, oh, well, this is me helping. Sometimes they just need to know that they're heard and that they're understood. So next. So stay, again, stay with the person. If it's something that is dire, stay with them until help comes. If there is a suicidal kind of feel that you're getting, remove anything that can harm them in the environment, or have the parent or caretaker or whatever. Encourage them to talk to an adult that they can trust. Encourage or help them find a therapist to talk to, and encourage them to go to their doctor. So by telling them to do it can be helpful, but sometimes you might have to help them take that step. Another thing, I love this. One awesome thing about Eeyore is that even though he's basically clinically depressed, he still gets invited to participate in adventures and shenanigans with all his friends. They never expect him to pretend to feel happy. They never leave him behind or ask him to change. They just show him love. So if you identify a friend or somebody who is going through a hard time, don't stop inviting them to things. Don't stop doing your normal things with them. Just show them love, because Lord knows we need more love in this world. And then this is more for emergency situations. Obviously, call 911. This number, I would take this down. I have shared this number countless of times with people who have just come to me and said, I think my son is contemplating suicide. I think, so-and-so has talked about this. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a number that I send out constantly. And that's a way to help someone. They can make the phone call, and it's a voice that they can talk to and help them process through their feelings, to kind of talk them down. So it is a professional that they're talking to. If you don't think that you can help them any further, that's definitely a great resource.